Hey Dave, how are you?
Hi, Carol Sue. I'm well. How are you today?
I'm hanging in there. So this is my no more meteorite class, right?
Right. I think so. Hey,
Here
Pam.
we are.
Hello, Michael. Oh, look, your community has come out to support you. So nice. Hey, Jeannie.
Hey.
Hey, Nancy. Anna.
Hi.
There's Sandra. Hello. Good to see everybody today. There's still some more people coming in. We're live streaming today.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Yeah, no worries. All good. Look at Pam in her apron. She looks great.
I had to get my little frilly apron out, yeah.
You might need to speak a little more loudly.
Yep. Bring it closer.
Oh, that works. That's perfect.
All right.
Okay. So a few more people coming in and we'll get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen a while. Yeah, this is an exciting day because it's so nice to bring members of the community in to talk about their recipes and show what they do in the kitchen. So this, I hope, will be one of many with Pam and also with others of you who might find this fun and interesting and not at all intimidating. We're just going to have some fun here. So is there anyone here? I know a lot of you. Is there anyone here who is brand new to any of my classes? Okay, Sandra, you are welcome. A special welcome to you. And are you new to Get Set Up as well?
No, I've been in Set Up for a couple of months now.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that you came to this class today to see Pam baking scones. Anybody else that's new to my classes? Okay, so by now I'm sharing my screen. You should see the picture of Pam's beautiful scone on the front slide here. Do you see it? Just want to make sure everybody's seeing it. Fantastic. And we're not going to be too slide heavy today, but my name is Deb and I'm your guide from York, Pennsylvania. My background's in business and now I've just transferred my training skills to training at Get Set Up, and it's really a lot of fun to learn more about food together with all of you. Get Set Up really is, I think, a neat platform for learning together, and we are interactive. So that's what sets us a little bit apart. You can go and look at YouTube videos for a lot of things, and they're very useful, but there's something about getting together in a group, especially when we're not able to do that so frequently. It's nice to be able to chat and to learn from each other. I'm sure we'll have all kinds of tips about scones today that we'll be able to talk about. So ideally, you're on camera and you're using your microphone, unmuting yourself whenever you want to make a comment or have a question. You can also, I certainly understand if you can't come on camera, that's fine. You can also use the chat box and ask questions there. We have Max with us today. Max is our TA, our technical support, our teaching assistant, and he is going to take a look at the chat from time to time, make sure that I'm not missing anything, and just help us along with any kind of technical questions or problems we might have along the way. So if you have any of those issues, Max is in the chat box. Just let him know what's happening. We are going to record this class, so you can email help@getsetup.io, and you can watch Pam make her scones over and over again if you like. And we are live streaming this class as well. And that means that anybody who is on our website can click the little TV button over on the left-hand side and see what's happening in this class. So I want to say hi to anybody who's out there watching this on live stream. And I would invite you to join us in a class like this. Just register for class, show up, turn on your camera, and join in the conversation. We would love that. Get Set Up isn't paid to promote any specific products or services. So any of the recipes or things that I share in any classes, Pam wasn't paid to bring her recipes to this session. So there are no financial connections. I should say Pam didn't pay us to put her recipe on this site. I guess that's what I should be saying. So that's the way it is. So let's talk a little bit about Pam Penny. I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to just introduce you to Pam. And I have a couple of questions just to get us rolling a little bit. Pam, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? Tell us about your family.
I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I know there's a lot of Michiganders out there. So I'm in the west side of the state, and I have 3 kiddos. One is leaving the nest this fall, going to Kentucky. We're very excited. And I have 2 others that'll be here. One of them is 15, one of them's 8. So we've got a while. And yeah, that's about me and my family. So.
And you have one that's just graduating, right?
Yes. Tomorrow's graduation, so it's a little crazy, but this is a distraction for me.
So just by a show of hands, who else is from Michigan here? Yeah, okay, quite a few of you. Yeah. Nice. So tell us about your hobbies, Pam.
Yeah, besides baking, which is definitely a hobby of mine, I enjoy art quite a bit, all kinds, all topics of art. Music, I grew up playing music. Piano and saxophone are my main go-tos. And exercising, I do like to exercise quite a bit outside or swimming. I'm very active. I like to keep active. That's why I do love Get Set Up. It gets me motivated to learn more and do more and see other people that do the same thing. So that's really fun. I really enjoy it.
Nice. So tell us about your art interest here at Get Set Up, because there might be some other people who might be wanting to join you.
Yes, I just started hosting a interest group on Thursdays, 12 to 1. Just for people that are interested in art. It can be any topic, anything, anybody, artists or mediums, or just to talk about what you're doing. We just started it, so we're just finding out what we really want to, do each week. It'll probably change depending on what everybody's interested in. So, yeah.
So there you go. You can just look up interest group art. Is that what it's called?
It's called The Joy of Art.
The Joy of Art. So that would be what you could Google in the search and find Pam's interest group. Thank you. So Pam, what's a fun fact about you?
I know. I asked my son, actually. He's home, and I said, "What is a fun fact about me?" And he mentioned that I've known my husband since 4th grade. We were neighbors. We didn't date all that time, and then he said, or that I was in the Michigan marching band. He thinks that's a fun fact. So that's all I have. Otherwise, I didn't really have anything. So yeah.
Hey, I think they're pretty good things. How many of you can say you knew your husband or your wife or your significant other from 4th grade? Anybody can say that? That's pretty unusual.
Yeah.
And being part of the Michigan band. Nice. Did you play the sax in the band? Obviously not the piano.
No, not the piano. That was a little heavy. So it was the alto saxophone. Yeah, it was hard work, very hard work, but it was worthwhile. So
nice.
Yeah.
I was in the only all-girls pep band in our state in Illinois at the time. And the next year they had guys in it. So I barely made it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And I was in a drum ensemble with them. It was a lot of fun.
That's a big job.
Yeah. So how did you get started making scones?
Well, since I like to bake so much, and I used to bake mostly sugary sweets, and I wanted to bake more and more, and I didn't have anything to do with them all. I'd end up with all these cookies, brownies, quick breads, and I couldn't give them all to my kids because that just wouldn't be right. I was telling Deb, I don't think they could fit out the door if I kept just feeding them what I made. So I still like something a little sweet for myself. And scones, I came by, I can't remember when, years ago, that they were a little sweet, but you could make them less sweet if you wanted. You can make them a little healthier. And so you can have, for me, I have one every day as part of my meal, breakfast usually. And it's just a fun thing you can tweak. And I've had a lot of fun with it, and all sorts of recipes. So you learn what you like best. And I just think it's a really fun, basic thing to make. And you can make them savory too. You don't have to make a sweet one. So, yeah.
So it sounds like you're making scones almost every week. Is that right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
The staple. It's like having a loaf of bread on the counter.
It is. It honestly is. And you don't have to wait for the rise time. It's, I love making breads, but the rise times just throws you off schedule when you're busy. It's hard to maintain that. So,
Yeah, you're really at the mercy of that
yes.
bread rising. Yeah. So what questions do you have for Pam before we launch into scones? Any questions that you want to ask her about living in Michigan or about her family or anything?
I have a daughter who lives in Taylor, Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that close? Close by where you are, Pam?
I actually don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
No, other side of the state. Taylor's more in the Detroit metro area.
Oh, okay.
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 We have a lot of family in the Detroit area, so yeah.
So I'm going to pop back onto my slides here for a moment and just go through a couple of things. And then I'm going to just turn this over to Pam so that she can start her demonstration. Our agenda, we're going to talk a little bit of background information about scones. Just I like to do the fun fact things. And then we're going to go right into Pam doing her demonstration. She's going to be demonstrating sweet scones today. I know she just talked about there being sweet and savory, but she's got the sweet tooth. So she's doing the sweet recipes. And then we'll open it up for just general discussion. Do you have recipes you want to share? Maybe Pam has other ones or tips and ideas. I know that some of you are feeling like, let's see, Carol Sue, I believe, feels like she makes scones that are, what'd you call them, Carol Sue, meteorites?
They're meteorites and
So-
lethal weapons.
So we'll see if we can get lighten up, collectively help Carol Sue lighten up her scones. So let's get right into it. First of all, how many of you have baked scones at this point? You've given it a try? You've made some scones? No? Some of
From a
you
mix.
from a mix? Okay.
Yeah. Put it in the thing, add the ingredients and hope for the best.
Yeah.
They were okay.
Yeah. So it's a good way to get into it, right? To see if you like them, and then you can.
No, I like them.
Oh, that's why you're here.
Little Starbucks scones are my favorite.
Oh, yeah, Starbucks. Starbucks is has a very tempting.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a little bit about scones in case you're interested in the background. The origins of where they came from are a little bit murky. They get credit for being originating in Scotland, and they were called bannock originally. And also in Cornwall, England, there's a lot that seems to suggest that they come from there. And they were first made with oats and a combination of oats and whole wheat flour. And they were cooked on a griddle. So that was the roots of the scone. And American scones, the way that we make them here, are typically called biscuits in England. They're made with more butter than the English scones are. And I see Pam shaking her head about that. Pam, weigh in on any of these as we go along.
Well, I was going to say, I think, did you read that? I read a little bit. They actually pronounce it scone.
Yeah, it can go either way, scone or scone. So there's this real debate about what's the correct way. So we're just going to say either one's correct, right?
Yeah, sure.
Scone or scone. Yeah. And British scones have a more plain flavor because they're intended to be really doctored up, so to speak, with clotted cream and with jam. And they are also a little taller and rounder than the ones that we make here, which tend to be a little flatter and cut into wedges for the most part. Does that square with what you see, Pam?
From the recipe, yeah. from the
Yeah.
recipes I use, that's pretty much right, spot on. Mhm.
So does anybody know what clotted cream is, or have you ever made clotted cream? Pam, do you serve yours with clotted cream?
No, I'm not very British when it comes to my scones, no.
Okay. Anybody know about clotted cream?
I've heard of it, but what does it taste like? I mean, is it like a cream or is it something really thick like a whipped cream or?
Yeah, it is
It's-
kind of well, clotted cream is a good description. And I'm going to just show you a little bit about that because I have not made it, but I've had it. I had a cousin who had a tea room, an award-winning tea room actually for many years. And she served traditional British scones and she made clotted cream and she served with jam, but it's almost like a butter spread. But it doesn't taste like butter. It does taste like cream. And the way that it is made is interesting and a little time consuming. So the difference, it looks similar to whipped cream, but it does taste different. So let's just look at this. Both start with heavy cream, but for whipped cream, you whip it into something that's really light and fluffy. But clotted cream, on the other hand, is heated slowly in the oven in a pan for maybe 12 hours, and it separates so that there's the thinner part of the cream that settles that's underneath the part that rises to the top, which is the cream. And there's a little bit of a skim on top of that. So what happens, and I'll send you the recipe for this. What happens is that when you get it out of the oven, I'm going to try to get down here. The cream has to be heated slowly for 12 hours. That's why the oven. So it's good to do it overnight and then cooled for another 8 hours. And so then you separate the cream from the liquid and you have that spread. So you get that layer of cream, that clotted cream on top. And I guess it has a little bit of a skin on top that you can just fold into the cream. That's not a problem at all. So it just takes a lot of time. It's really not something that you have to do a lot with. It's kind of like bread rising, right? You don't have to do a lot with it except when you do, right? Take it out of the oven or take a moment to knead it. So that's what clotted cream is. And it's served on top of these scones at British tea time and with a little bit of jam. So if you ever wondered, there you go. And just another little fun fact, the British royalty say that the correct time to eat a scone is with afternoon tea, which starts promptly at 4 p.m. So if you want to have your scones like a Brit, that's what you can do. And I know the tea houses will often do that. They have a high tea and an afternoon tea. So we're going to stop now and I'm going to turn this over to Pam.
All right.
And
Yeah,
we're going to
so I got things ready, so I wouldn't have to you wouldn't have to watch me measure too much stuff here. But one thing, so
We can't see her, Deb.
the
Oh.
one
You can't wait. Hold on here.
And I'm having a hard time hearing her.
Okay. So Pam, do you want to share your screen?
okay.
And turn her volume up.
Let's see. Share. Okay. And do I share the desktop
You can share the
application?
just share your Zoom application where you see yourself. Do you see yourself?
No, let me share desktop.
Try that.
And I see the entire screen. They want to share the contents of my screen. No.
I think everybody can pin their screen and they'll see her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you click on the top and
there, I pinned myself and I can see myself. Did everybody else pin me?
yeah. So
Now I can see you.
Okay. Does that
Okay.
work?
good,
Yeah.
good.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to do a recipe that is a basic scone. And
Actually, can't see her anymore.
Okay. So go up to her picture. You can't see her picture at all. Can you go up to the right? and
No,
click-
you came back on as the main person.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
You got it now?
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Mhm.
So this one, I use a recipe that's just 2 cups of flour. So some will do more than that, but then you're gonna get a big batch. And I like to just keep it to 2 cups of flour. And what I do for my flour is I do 1 cup of regular unbleached white flour. And then the other one I wanted to mention was I actually do a white whole wheat flour for my other cup. So that way it brings in a little more grain and it's not as heavy as a whole wheat flour. And King Arthur, I don't know if there's other brands that make this, but they make a really good white whole wheat flour just to be a little more nutritious since I do have so many scones. It does create it to be a little heavier, but it's worth it to me to have a little bit more grain. So I just have those 2 cups, and then it calls for a 1/3 cup granulated sugar. I have not experimented with the stevias or whatever those substitutes are, but it's certainly I would try it if it's something you're interested in. And then this recipe is 2 teaspoons of baking powder and 1/4 of baking soda. Recipes vary in the amounts of those 2. I find the recipes with that combination work best for the rise. Some even will say a whole tablespoon of baking powder. I haven't found that there's much difference, and it's overkill on the amount. So that's right here.
Pam, if you're in different elevations, it does make a difference.
It does make a difference. And I find that this one just has the nicest rise. And then when it's more baking powder, I find that it's a little more rise, but it's drier. But that's just my experience.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. Oh, and then
So depending upon where you are, you might have to experiment with that a little bit.
that is true. Humidity and all that will affect it. And I did have a 1/2 teaspoon of salt in there. That's pretty consistent across the board. You do need that because that definitely affects the rise as well. And then this recipe calls for a whole 1/2 cup of unsalted butter. I always back off on that. I find that I don't need that much. That's something you can experiment with, just again to keep it, I guess you could say, a little more healthy. I just try to do the best I can to make it still palatable, but not as fattening. So what I did for my butter, I'll show you.
Pam, have you ever experimented with almond flour? We have a question here about whether almond flour works.
I have not. And it's funny that you asked, because I received a bag of cashew flour that I don't know what to do with. So that would be a good question. And I'll have to look into that because I've heard good things about almond flour. I just don't know anything about it yet.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Anybody else out there while Pam is getting her ingredient there? Anybody else want to weigh in on the almond flour? Anybody know?
Yes, my wife, that's what she uses.
She does. Does she use it to make
Yeah.
scones?
Yes.
Oh, nice. Okay. And what do you think about the way that they turn out, Michael? Do they get different?
It's improving.
Okay, it's a work in progress.
Yes, it used to be heavy. Now it's lighter.
Oh, okay.
So she's working the proportions.
Yeah, I was gonna
And
say, yeah, it might be a matter of adding a 1/4 cup first, then see if you can go to a 1/2, backing off, adding more. You have to figure that, and that's the same with the whole wheat. A whole cup of it might be too much for some in the beginning. It might be too heavy, so you might want to back off a little bit, but just a little, just to get that grain in there, and that does keep you full longer, which is nice too, especially because I have them in the morning. So now the butter, it's unsalted, and what I do is I shred it. And I love this flat shredder because I can put it over the bowl and then I just go like this to shred the amount of butter I want. And that way it's easier to crumble. So I've already done it. And you want to keep the butter as chilled as possible right up until you use it. Some will even put it in the freezer. It needs to create that nice crumble consistency. So I'm first going to mix all the dry ingredients up.
I love your tip for shredding butter. Do you do that for all of your pastries that require butter? Like pie crusts and things?
Yeah, for pie crust I would. not for cookies necessarily or those kind of things, but the ones that you do your hand.
Right, that creates a crumb like that. Yeah, very interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put this
Good
in there. I
tip.
already washed my hands. So then, so I used, and this for me, I used, I think it was 5 and it calls for 8. And my consistency is fine for me. So again, it's something you might want to figure out, or if you just want a full half cup, go for it.
So you used 5 tablespoons.
5 tablespoons, yes. Yeah.
And it calls for 8, and you were able to reduce it by, wow, that was quite a bit that you're able to reduce it by.
Well, and this recipe also calls for some heavy whipping cream. So I knew there'd be more fat than others that don't have that.
Mhm.
And also it has an egg and a Greek yogurt. I used Greek yogurt, and that does make a difference, honestly, versus the other, it's thicker. So between all of that, I just didn't need all the butter.
Mhm.
So you want to get it kind of like a pie crust, like Deb was saying. The consistency is more of a crumble, and I don't know if you're gonna. I tried to use a glass bowl so it's easier to see how it's going.
Yeah.
For you, but
Can you tilt the bowl just a little bit at some point so we can see inside there?
Just going like this.
Yeah.
The shredding definitely helps because I don't like cutting things up so much. I don't like using knives if I don't have to. So it's nice not to have to cut them into little tiny pieces, because that's pretty much what you need to do to get a good consistency. So then with that, also with the heavy whipping cream, I was going to say, that is also something I experiment with. I sometimes will even just use 2% milk maybe instead. It really, it's all preference. But again, when I have so many, I try to be lighter than it says. And I've had good results just using milk. Today I did get the real stuff just because it's a
Do you ever
special.
use coconut milk?
I have not tried coconut milk. I've not experimented with almond, or that might add an interesting flavor. Even that's one you could even try a little bit of and kind of go from there. So let me get the heavy cream. And I'm just going to put my egg right into the heavy cream. And I have to show you my egg if you can see it. You can see there's a little stamp of a heart on it. I get it from a local farmer. They're the cutest eggs you've ever seen. So,
nice.
So.
Pam, if I could ask a question.
Mhm.
When you were stirring in the chilled butter to your dry mixture, have you ever used a dough whip?
A dough whip.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a pastry cutter, but
No, not a pastry cutter, a dough whip.
no.
No. Now, would you use the pastry cutter in lieu of your fingers then?
You could do both or one of, yes, I was just going to show you that as a tool you can use, like this.
Okay.
You don't want to overwork it. So you might want to just do a little bit of both if you've got chunks that you just can't get rid of. The only thing I don't like as much about this is a lot of times it gets trapped.
Yes.
In that part of the.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
thank you.
just scoop it out. All right, so let me break up the egg a little bit. And then there's a container. This is basically the amount of a third a cup. So basically, and I use a non-fat Greek yogurt, and that was completely fine. So I add all of the wet ingredients at the same time. I do kind of make a well, and I'll show you what that is in just a second.
When you cut in your taking in butter, should it be like pie crust pea size? Is that what you're looking for the butter and the flour?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And I'm just going to mix that up a little bit. And then this recipe, and this is what's fun about scones to me, it says you can add a little vanilla, so you can add a little flavor that way. So I'll do that. It says a teaspoon. I love vanilla. I'm a little generous on that. So, and I'll stir it up again. And then, oh, one thing I forgot to mention. If you add a mix in, like a chocolate chip or raisin or craisins or even cinnamon chips. There's the sky's the limit. That's again one thing I like about scones. You can just, depending on the day, put your mix in you want. I'm gonna add chocolate chips, and I just found, I was so excited, organic chocolate chips that are not a fortune. So that I was excited about that. So I'm gonna add a half cup of chocolate chips first before I add the wet ingredients, and then I'll just mix it up a little bit. Just like that. And then I'm gonna make the well. I don't know that every recipe says to, but I think it's easier to stir it if you do. I'm gonna pour it in the center. And then with scones in particular, I've noticed you don't want to overwork the dough. That makes it chewier, tougher, denser. So you want it, that's why I like doing a well, because for me, I just like to fold it in like this, going around to start real gently. And then eventually you're just gonna have to stir a little bit, but just keep it light. And sometimes I've noticed, and Deb, like you said, it might depend on where you are or the humidity of the day. I actually do have to add a little bit, maybe a milk. It depends. And sometimes when you use a grainier flour, I've noticed you might need to add just a little bit, because what you want to be able to do is make it into a ball, which isn't always easy. This is the part I still have trouble judging on if it's gonna be enough liquid. So
Can you mix this in a food processor?
I have not. I don't know. Do you mean like the pie crust when you would do that part?
Yeah, yeah.
I have not tried that. It probably worth trying, as long as you don't do the liquid part in there, because I think that would over process it. That's my guess.
Thank you.
So here we are, and this is the part that's tough. And when you're short, it's hard to get the bowl. Sometimes I have to bring out my stool. So really get in there, and I'm trying not to overwork it the whole time here. Just gently get into a ball. And then I've got a parchment paper on a cookie sheet ready. And recipes typically will say makes 8 scones. Well, those are huge. So I cut it in half and make 2 rounds of 6 or so scones and cut them into triangles, like you saw, into wedges. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take it out. And this might be hard to show. Let's see if I get the cookie sheet ready.
Sam, we have a question while you're doing that. Juanita wants to know, can you use frozen fruit in your scones?
Let's see, I have. Often it didn't work out well because it would get too watery. Once it started to melt in your dough, it was too wet. So you can certainly try it. Maybe, I think I did blueberries and that didn't go well, but maybe you could thaw them first and then pat them dry. I don't know. So here I am, and I'm just dividing. Let me see if I can move my camera a little bit. I'm just dividing it like this. If you come up with your own method, feel free, because this isn't the cleanest method. But I'm making 2 balls here, and I'm just flattening them out, again, gently. And you make circles about 3/4 to an inch thick. Doesn't have to be a perfect circle, just whatever shape you want. I don't like making them individual. I think that's more of the English way, Deb, is that they make them more individual, right? The circles. Is that right?
Yes, I think so.
That you saw, I mean, the pictures you have,
Yes.
the circles of a biscuit.
Yes.
Because they get too dry for me when I like it this way when they're kind of connected.
What's the texture of the dough?
It's with this whole wheat, it makes it very soft. And with the heavy cream, I think that makes it soft too. And mine's a little heavy because of the grain. If it's just all white flour, it should feel pretty light and buttery, really.
Can you use bread flour?
I've not tried that. I think it's what you have, you could try it. It might rise differently. Isn't that what bread flour is about? The rise, I think. And there's more protein in it. So, all right. So this is good enough for a circle. And then all I do, honestly, well, there's lots of ways you could cut it. Because again, I don't like to bring out knives if I don't have to. Let me watch them just a second. So
Pam, are you frozen up there a little bit? Can anybody else see Pam? Can you hear me?
I hear you, but
I
she's
hear you, but
frozen.
she's frozen.
Okay. Pam, can you hear? There you go. You were frozen for a little while, but you're back.
okay. Did you catch using a pizza cutter to get
No.
No.
Okay. Some things you can use to cut up the scones. I don't like using knives a whole lot just because. So I'll use a pizza cutter to cut into wedges, or you could even use one of these dough scrapers, I think they're called, or I can't remember the other name, pastry scraper.
Bench scraper.
There you go. Thank you. You can do that if you have room on your pan there. And when I cut them, I don't cut them all the way through just so that it seems like, from my experience, it retains a little bit more moisture if you don't completely separate them. A lot of recipes do say to just put them an inch apart. I just don't. I just basically get maybe where it's just a little bit connected. And then after they bake and cool, then I complete the cutting.
So you prefer to have your scone more moist inside?
I do. I think they last longer too. But scones freeze very well. So that's another thing I like about them. So if you make, a batch, just feel free to freeze what you don't want and they'll thaw and taste pretty fresh.
So we have some questions here after the frozen fruit question.
Mhm.
How much cream?
How much cream?
Yeah, there was a question about how much cream.
There was a 1/3 cup of heavy whipping cream in this recipe.
Okay.
And I
Third of a
believe
cup.
the other recipe I sent doesn't have cream.
Okay. And Pam is talking about her 2 recipes, which you will get at the end of the class as links, and that will be in the email that I send out to you. There's a couple of other questions. Lorraine is interested in knowing, can you put fresh blueberries in the flour? And then Barbara said, I've added blueberries on top and pressed them in. And Lorraine said, well, I wonder, she said, I put them on top. I was wondering if it would work better if you put them in the flour before adding the liquid. So do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I would try that. Any fixings, they do recommend you do with the dry. It also helps you not overwork the dough, because if you put it in after you put in the liquid, it's harder to get that spread out. They clump up more, so you have to work it more to get them all separated.
And that's something you don't want to do. You don't want to overwork your dough. So that makes sense.
You don't want to overwork your dough. That makes a big difference.
So that could contribute, overworking your dough could contribute to the meteorite syndrome.
Yes, I was thinking that. Yes, that could be one factor. Yeah.
Also, I think it's the butter, because I was using that as if I was making cookies and leaving it out at room temperature. So I think that freeze the butter would help me too.
Yes, I think so. And I see what you think. Get it as frozen as you can. Sometimes when I actually froze it, it was a little too hard to shred. But if you get to just about frozen, that seems to be perfect, as far as it's much easier to use the shredder for that, if you want to use the cheese shredder. So yeah. So that's pretty much it. And then they go in the oven at 400. That is the best temperature I've found is 400, at least where I live. And the timing for them will definitely vary depending on how you tweak your ingredients or your oven. The whole wheat takes a little bit longer, I think. Typically they say 15 to 18 minutes, but I find mine take closer to 20 sometimes. And it depends on how much you like them done. The longer you leave them in there, of course, the drier they'll get if you over bake. So you got to be careful about that. And you can just kind of take them out and see what you think. You can kind of cut into the center. If it's a little too doughy, put them back in. It's not like a cupcake though, or a muffin where you can take a toothpick and do that kind of test. So that's something you just got to figure out.
You really figure out the way that you like it. And I assume they get a little bit brown on the bottom, maybe a little tad brown on top, but not too much.
On the top for sure. Yeah. The bottom, maybe not so much. That might be
okay.
overdone for sure.
Okay. That would be overdone.
Yeah.
So I see that Lorraine's also said that she freezes her scones before baking. And what about brushing cream on top? What would that do?
Yes, you can. If you do it beforehand, like an egg wash, I don't know about brushing cream. I have not tried that, but you could brush an egg wash on top to get that more, you'll see the shinier ones. You can do the cream. I've not tried brushing. Is that something she does or is she asking? Because that'd be an interesting tip if she has that tip.
Lorraine, is that something that you do? Do you want to unmute yourself and let us know? Yes, she said she does. Okay, so she might not be able to. Yeah, Lorraine, does that make them brown or shiny, or what's the result? She's thinking about that. Well, she said she thinks it affects the texture. Oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that wouldn't have been in my guesses. Okay. So I'm going to do a little bit of checking here to see if I can find anything more about cream on scones. But
something else you can do is in this recipe that I made does have a recipe for a glaze. A lot of people will put a glaze on their scone. Again, I don't need the sweetness, so I don't do that, but it's just powdered sugar and milk, like a cup of powdered sugar to a tablespoon or two of milk. And you can just drizzle that on after they're basically cooled, I would say. Otherwise it just melts right into the scone. And then you can make a nice little design of the swirls or just a coating. So you can do that with scones as well. And yes, I have heard you can put your scones in the freezer. That is another tip. I think I did try it and it did rise just a little bit better. So I didn't let it get to like frozen. But I put it in there for about even just 10 or 15 minutes, and that was enough to make a little bit of a difference. So that's a good tip.
Okay. So at the point where you put the chocolate chips in to make it savory, is that where you would put whatever you want to put in, like cheese or whatever you wanted to make it a savory?
I'm gonna guess so. I've actually never made a savory scone with cheese, but I've got to imagine that's exactly when you would add it. For any, I think just baking in general, you want to add those mix-ins. And tell me if I'm wrong, Deb, I think, but with the flour part of it, just because of how it mixes. Otherwise, it gets too clumpy in anything after it's wet.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
And after you take them out, they'll look something like this, or the picture that you saw. And I actually forgot to leave some out. I had to take them out of my freezer. So you can see this is what they look like after they're frozen. They look pretty fresh, actually.
So do you do anything before you eat them after they come out of the freezer? You just let them come to room temperature and thaw and they're ready to go?
Yeah, just to room temperature. I think if you tried to slowly heat them in a toaster, you could, but they're so thick that I think it might be a little inconsistent. Or the microwave, I think, might make them too chewy. But if you're in a hurry, go ahead and try. They're pretty good cold, actually, if they are not quite thawed. Obviously I love scones. I think they're very versatile.
I was just going to say that's.
I use a paper towel a wet paper towel over something like that, like a piece of bread or something, so it doesn't get, you mentioned it getting too chewy. And I only do like, maybe 20 seconds, but having the wet paper towel there makes it so that it doesn't get too hard. Like, I did that with a bagel this morning. Just put a wet paper towel around it so it doesn't get too hard.
Oh, that's okay.
And don't bake it forever, just, a few seconds. Try how you like it,
That I will do that. I actually have, well, not now, but I make bagels too. And oftentimes we forget to thaw them out for the morning, and I've never figured out how to thaw them quickly. So I'll try that next time. So
I came in late from another class. So can you use any other kind of flour, like almond flour or anything else other than wheat flour?
yeah, Michael was saying his wife has tried almond flour, but like with any flour that you try, I use a white whole wheat. I was showing the class that's a King Arthur white whole wheat. You're going to want to play around with how much you add, because it could be overpowering or it could be too heavy. So I use half whole wheat, the white whole wheat, and half white, which is probably pretty heavy for a lot of people. I just like more grain. But you might want to start with even just a quarter cup, a third a cup, and then go from there, whichever flour you're trying. I haven't tried anything beyond whole wheat. Now I want to try almond flour because I think that would be interesting. And I was telling the class, I have some cashew flour that showed up with one of my orders, and I don't really know what to do with it. I never thought of adding it to a scone just to see how it goes. So yeah.
Almond flour or coconut flour? I don't know how that would work.
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And if you're gluten intolerant, it sounds like you have to be you might have to really experiment, because maybe there's been combinations here with other flours, but you can't obviously do that if you're gluten insensitive. So, or gluten sensitive.
In that one, you don't really, there's no point in adding a little, right? Because you have to be totally gluten-free. Yeah. So I know there is a King Arthur. I'm not getting paid. They're honestly it's a good company for bakers, in my opinion, and a great website with recipes. But they have a gluten-free flour that I had really good luck with their muffins. It actually turned out pretty well. So
good tip.
Know about scones.
Now, do you ever use Bob's Red Mill products?
Yeah, it's just not as prevalent here, but that's a great one too. I do like that. They have a lot of neat, really different flours, little and great like cereals, those dry warm cereal bags. You can bake with those. I've done that with some breads. It's really neat textures and
So when you do that, do you when you use those for baking bread, do you grind them then first in your food processor to make them into flour?
Yeah, I've never thought of that actually, but that is something you can do. I've got to, because that cereal is pretty grainy.
Yeah. So you could make that finer texture.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's great.
Also, King Arthur flour does take and have a baker's hotline. Have a Butterbell has a turkey hotline. Well, they do take and have a baker's taken in hotline. So if you have taken in questions, all the people there on the other end of the line is answer baking questions, and I have used them in the past and have not been disappointed.
Nice.
They are wonderful. That is a good point. I just called them the other day actually I do a lot of baking for my sourdough baking, and they're the only ones that could understand what I was asking, because it's a tricky thing with sourdough. And you're right, they just answered as the baker, and then they also do a chat if you want to do a chat online as well. So super helpful, friendly people. Their whole life is
very nice. So. Very nice. So they just have a hotline. I think I see it here, so I'll post that in the notes for anyone who's interested. And just out of curiosity, what was your question about the sourdough?
How to know when it's ready, the starter, when it's ready, and how long I have to use it once it's ready. That was my question.
Yeah. Juanita, you have a question or a comment? Go ahead.
Question. How many scones does that recipe make?
Well, the recipe will tell you 8, but I make it, this is how I cut mine up. So 8 is, I can't imagine 8 scones, they'd be huge. And so I don't need them that big. So I cut them up like this, and that probably also affects the baking time. So if you do what I do, just watch it, because it will probably be quicker than the huge circle of dough. So I think I made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I just cut mine into six wedges each, so 12 scones.
Thank you.
When you spread out your dough, how many inches is it? How do we know how far to spread it?
Yeah, it's usually 3/4 to an inch.
But in length, I mean in a round, is it like?
It's probably 8 inches or so. I'm guessing.
Okay. They look pretty small from here, from what I'm looking at them. I just, so I can't imagine cutting that into 6, would be tiny little scones, but I guess it's just a picture.
They look, or make them bigger, and then you can just cut them up after they're done, whatever you want.
When you put your outstretched palm over the top of that, maybe that gives us a little bit of a measure, or hold it up there.
Small hands. So it's like that.
Yeah, so.
And they're very small hands.
Yeah.
That's how big I make mine. And you just start spreading out gently from the center. So that way you just kind of spread out until you get to that 3/4 or 1 inch thickness. That way you don't have to overwork or go back. And that's just how round mine ended up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. This has been great. Other questions that anyone has? They're making me hungry, and I feel like I need to make some scones now. Anybody else feel like they want to go make some scones?
Yeah, I think I'm going to try to make some tonight.
Yeah.
Looks
awesome.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And you
just have fun with it. Yeah. Great.
I think you make it sound so much more approachable. Come into it thinking, I don't know if I can make a scone, but you've shown us that it can vary a great deal, that they aren't that particular. You can experiment a little bit.
Exactly right. I think whenever a couple times I've thrown a batch away because I forgot an ingredient and it just didn't turn out. But most of the time it turns out well enough, and go for it. And then you'll know how to tweak it next time. So, yeah.
Very nice. Thanks, Pam. I'm going to go ahead and take you off the hot seat at this point, unless anybody has, well, you can still ask questions. That is fine.
I'm good. Thank you.
that worked out beautifully. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Pam.
I'm going to share my screen here, and just a few tips. I think some of these actually came up. These are some tips for light scones. So the cold butter, you were all over that. That's definitely an important piece of it for making lighter scones, and cut into cubes or shredded the way that Pam did it. And the tip in the article that I'm attaching for you is to measure the pastry flour by spooning it, not pouring it in, so it doesn't get more dense. And if you're using frozen fruit, you drain it really well, because if you do have juice in there, you're going to make a denser dough, a wetter dough. If you're using ingredients that have sugar in them, lighten up on the sugar that is measured into the dough. That wouldn't necessarily lighten it up from a texture standpoint, but it lightens it from a calorie standpoint. And I think one of the things that Pam really emphasized was don't overmix these, because that can affect the texture. And I think, was it Leslie? Somebody said they freeze their scones beforehand, and keeping them cold before you bake them seems to be a pretty important piece, as well as preheating the oven, making sure that's up to full preheat. And Pam said she does bake hers with parchment paper. So we've had some other tips on there too, brushing them with cream. And I just was verifying that brushing them with cream tends to give them a little shine and gives them a little golden color. So that would be the benefit of doing that if you wanted to have a little golden color. So this was fun. It was our first co-hosting. What did you think? Yeah, let's give Pam a round of applause. You did a wonderful job, and did a wonderful job.
Really nice.
Fun, thank you.
And I would invite any of you to email me at debtheguide@getsetup.io if you have something like this that you would like to do. Maybe you're experimenting with a different kind of flour and you found a recipe that really works, or you've got some a favorite dish of some sort. I'd love to have you come and join me with that. And we would do just exactly what we've done here. You can see it's not scary. And we've got such a welcoming audience. So do join me if that seems to be something that would be of interest to you. So we've got some classes. This afternoon, I'm doing healthy meals. That's not on here, but we've got a spotlight on seasonal ingredients tomorrow. And also tomorrow, well, next Mexican Fiestas next week, but we have a Let's Cook class, or Let's Talk Cooking, which is tomorrow at 4:00. I think it's 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. That's where we get together in a forum just to talk free form about any topic relating to food or cooking, whatever happens to be on your mind. So I would love to have you join me and talk about what sounds good to you. So I will send you some notes out after class. We'll give you Pam's recipes. I'll send you that hotline for King Arthur's flour and a few other little things that I found along the way, including a little video that shows a little more about who talked about the flour whip or the whisk. Who talked about that? I found a video on that, and I will attach that video so you can take a look at that. It looks like a pretty handy little implement that we might be interested in looking at a little more closely. So you can get your feedback button here. Susan, you're raising your hand. Was that you?
Yes.
Yes. Well, thanks for that tip. So I will attach that video. It looks really like a great tool. So I will send you some ideas for next classes. And you can view the schedule right from your email and give us feedback too. So let us know how we did and what you thought about this format. If you think you'd like to see more of these, it would be really helpful to get that feedback from you. And don't forget to invite a friend when you come to another class. When you sign up for a class, plenty of opportunities to invite a friend. And as well, hook us up with the community organizations where you live so that we can include more people in these classes. And I'll stop my share here. And can you see Pam or can you see me?
I see Pam.
Okay. So are we on gallery now? Okay. So I want to thank all of you for coming. I especially want to thank Pam for taking the time. I know that it takes prep time and you were probably thinking a lot about how to stage everything. And I really appreciate the investment of time to do this and then coming on here and sharing your recipes. And we will see you at the next class. I look forward to the next time. Thanks for coming.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Pam.